Hello, this is Paris Underground Radio. My name is Annette Deleu, and this is The Heart of You. Hello, and welcome back to The Heart of You. This is episode 7, a two-part series on past lives and the Akashic Records. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Ray. Ray has been a longtime client who has done incredible work within the Akashic Records. And I wanted you to hear his story firsthand about all of the work that he has done and how much delving into his past lives has helped him move forward with his spiritual awakening and his life growth. I would like to welcome you to the show. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Hey, Annette. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
So I wanted to ask you, what first brought you to the Akashic Records?
Yeah, I can't pin down how I originally found out about them, but I think it was somewhere in the course of over a 7-year period that started back in about 2014 or so, trying to expand my spiritual horizons after being stuck in a very dogmatic, traditional, religious environment for 25 years. And after leaving that, became just very curious about what all the universe had to offer above and beyond, essentially what we get in the daily news of religious dogma. Right. So, I started doing things like watching Gaia.com. I watched all this stuff on YouTube. And in the course of that, I somehow heard about this thing, the Akashic Records. And I was like, wow, well, that's really interesting. This is this collection of all the information that there ever was or ever will be. And it's there. And if you know how to access it, you can really utilize that to help make sense of your life and hopefully make better decisions and see your life path and your destiny. And I would imagine anyone listening to this podcast has sat back at some point and gone, what is this all about? Things aren't quite working the way I want them to, daggone it, so I was like, oh, I think this is the same thing as like, in some ways, what would be called, like in Christianity, it would be called like, the book of life, where everything's recorded. Although they always make it sound like, this is all being recorded and you're going to have this life review because you're going to be punished.
Right. And that's not the case at all, right?
Yeah, and nobody wants that. That's how I kind of became aware of the Akashic Records. I just didn't know that there was anyone who could actually really look into them. So
right.
Yeah, that's how I became aware of it.
Once you decided, okay, I'm going to contact somebody to get an Akashic record reading, what did you have in mind? Did you have any preconceived notions of what you wanted to accomplish, or did you really go into it with an open mind? How did you approach it?
I don't know if desperation is the right word in that. And the way that I found out about you is because there's someone that I have a lot of esteem for, who I came about. I was going through this just incredibly difficult relationship situation, and I found one of her books on Audible on the subject, and I listened to it, and I was like, oh wow, I want to find out more about her because this book is outstanding. But I found out that she does card readings for relational things, and I had just never done that before, right? And I was like, hey, universe, I'm open to whatever change has to happen in my life. A lot of this stuff that is going on with the relationship is pointing me towards core things within myself that I want to identify and overcome. And so, over the course of maybe like 3 months, I would like do a card reading with her every month, just trying to check in. And the accuracy of that was insane. But one thing that came up, this card that kept coming up, was we're stuck in a cycle. And so I don't know if it was the third time it came up, but she was like, Ray, you've gotten this before. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that one. And I'm like, what does that mean exactly? And she said, well, you're stuck in a karmic cycle. And that's part of what apparently the purpose of this relationship is to overcome. And she said, you should talk to Annette, because Annette does Akashic readings. And if you can identify if there was some kind of a contract that needs to either be released or is expired, or you can, ask for assistance from your guides and your angels with, then, if this keeps coming up that you're stuck in a cycle, they're trying to get your attention that it needs to be broken. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I was like, well, how do I do that? So she gave me your contact information and I reached out to you. We booked time. And the interesting thing with it, Annette, was not only did we spend a lot of time going through some amazing past life stuff, that the nuances of multiple past lives, seeing how those issues were woven into the current situation was really amazing. So that was enough for me to just go, wow, this is unbelievable information. But then at the end, you were like, well, okay, let's really take a look at what contracts may need to be broken, and we'll see who comes forward. I had just lost my mom, like, I don't know, it was probably like 2 months earlier. You were like, okay, Ray, this woman has come forward, and you described her. And I was like, you know what? I know it's my mom, even though what Annette is describing does not look like my mom. And then like 10 seconds later, you said something to the effect of, okay, she's saying that the way that she's presenting herself to me is not the way that she looked in real life. She's presenting this way because this is the energy that she carried when she was with you. And I was like, oh my God, I knew it, So we went through that whole thing, which was very interesting. And there were just things that came forth about information from the Akashics with my mom that there was no way you could have known. We went through a couple other things, and then you said, okay, well, we're getting ready to close it soon. Let's see if there's anyone else that wants to come forward. I'm in this, quasi-hypnotic meditative state as we've been doing this. And I'm just thinking, my beloved dog, I had to euthanize back in September of last year. And I missed him so much. And apparently we've had multiple lives together. Would it even be possible that my dog showed up? And I was like, I don't know, So you paused for a little while, and then you said, no, I don't think anyone else is coming. And I was like, then you go, wait, Ray, this is really strange because it's never happened before. Your dog is here. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and so it was such a, again, to me, it was like, okay, this isn't just a joke. Like, because one of the things that you go through with this is this just imagination? Because you're dealing with an unreality compared to our day in, day out, hey, time to do the laundry, like, hey, got to go to work, hey, got to get on a conference call. I mean, you're dealing with this deep esoteric stuff. And you're just like, is this real? Like, is this all real? And then when you describe, like, my dog he was huge, and he would put his hands on my shoulders. Like, he would jump up, and I would let him, of course. He never did it violently, but he would like to put his paws on my shoulders. And you were like, Ray, he's put his paws on your shoulders, and you're going into all this. And I was just like about to burst out into tears. So, it was really an amazing experience. And yeah, I guess that's a long answer to your question in that, but
yeah, that was your first experience with the Akashic Records. And I just have to say that it is incredible that being that was your first experience, that you went into the session knowing that the work that you had to do was on yourself. Yeah. Because a lot of times when people go to, let's say, psychic readings or things like that, it's simply because they want to know, well, what is the other person doing? Or are they going to change? Or they're trying to find out information about things that are outside of themselves. And the work that you have been doing is so beautiful because you went into this from the very beginning, knowing that I'm going through some cycles here. So clearly this means that it's something that I need to look at within myself and try to figure out what I need to unravel.
Totally. Yeah. And it's not, Annette, it's not that I didn't want to know the other things that you mentioned. Of course I did, but I knew to your point, it was like, because you can't take action for anyone else to really change unless they want to, right? But you have to change what you can within yourself. And that's hard, especially when the message coming from the guides is part of your lesson in this lifetime is patience and trust when you want things to resolve in a certain way.
And right now.
Exactly. Right now, dang it, so that was so that was hard.
That's something you and I have talked about quite often, is talking about clearing cycles and doing the healing work and healing those patterns and all of that, and how a lot of times it takes multiple situations to finally clear those patterns. So you may go through a situation in a relationship, and then you might go through the same situation again in another relationship, but then maybe it's slightly different or a little bit less potent, let's say, a little less strong as a pattern or as a habit. And my question to you is, in regards to these cycles that you've been going through and the work that you've been doing, what cycles and patterns do you feel that you have been able to clear? And which cycles and patterns do you feel like are the ones you're still kind of fine-tuning and working on?
Wow. Well, I would say probably haven't 100% cleared any of them, but man, have gained massive ground on recognizing them. And I think that's a huge part of it, is when you recognize them, then you can take different action. So as far as my feelings go, I still feel similar feelings that I did before, but not to the depth that I did before. We started doing this work and some other techniques that I've worked on, including QHHT, the quantum healing hypnosis therapy, which is outstanding, who a mutual friend of ours does, and she's awesome, right?
Right. And that's Angie DeCanalis, who, if you have not listened to the previous episode that we did on mediumship, which is episode 5, please go back and listen to that episode, because the interview that I did with Angie is really, really life-changing.
And being able to sit there, both from the information that came through the Akashics, it's like, wow, I can trace this back to the earliest memories that I have of, these issues that really came around with relationship with my family of origin, and how that dysfunction aligned to the decisions that I'd made over the course of my life. And so if you have that awareness, it's like, oh, there's a pattern here. And if part of my life purpose in this is to exceed that pattern, to gain mastery over that pattern, which again is part of what came up in the Akashics, right? Is that it's like, okay, well, now I have knowledge and awareness. So if I keep repeating the same pattern and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity, right?
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so now I look at, I'm a habitual overgiver, and I had the capacity to, really put myself all out there, and to the point where it's not in your own best interest.
Yeah, because it can be really draining to your energy, especially when you're a light worker and an empath. If you are constantly giving, then you're in that imbalance. And then that creates those lower energies of resentment and anger and all of that. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd say that was the main one in that, like, just really trying to get to the point of, oh, I understand. I was set up for this model because of, honestly, the lack of emotional support within my family of origin. So that's kind of this whole, performance equals love, always have to go the extra mile to get the validation, that kind of thing. And just going, no, you know what? I don't need to repeat that pattern in any way. And that goes across the board. That's not only your personal relationship or work or, within your family, but it's just with you, where you're going, no, I'm going to have this time and focus for genuine authenticity and self-love. And that sounds so cheesy, just like,
It's not, though. It's absolutely not. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I'd say that would be it.
We will be right back with the Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. One of the things that's really important about what you just said, Ray, is when you're talking about the cycle that you were trying to work through, which is people pleasing or overgiving, looking for validation, all of those type of things that people have a tendency to do when they are empaths. And when we are in relationships with people, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships, it doesn't really matter. It's amazing how sometimes people can reflect back at you the exact cycle that you are meant to work on, because they may be working on the exact same cycle, but in a different way. So if you're often wondering, well, what are the cycles that I'm working on? What are the patterns and the karmic lessons that I need to clear? Look at the relationships that you have around you, because that might tell you a lot about the type of things that you need to work on. You might say that's not applicable because this person I'm in a relationship with, let's say they are completely different from you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are working on completely different lessons. So looking very deeply into your relationships is a really great way to start looking at those cycles.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And even kind of like I said before, it's not just like a personal relationship. I had to look at everything at work. I had to look at situations with my family.
Right.
And just things of like, okay, am I repeating these same patterns? Because sometimes we can function one way in a professional environment or our work environment, or, with our children or something, very differently than we would like in a personal relationship or in a parental relationship. It's good with the Akashics that you're getting that kind of broader view of who you are. Like work, for sure, had to go back and, examine some of the dynamics that had been at play for a couple years in a very challenging situation at work, and going, okay, how have I allowed the same challenge to present itself in my work environment, and what steps do I need to take to remediate that?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's the Akashics is not just all about, I guess, you're the expert, so tell me in the audience, but like, I'm sure there are people who come to this maybe with no need for, hey, I'm really trying to, like, I'm working through a deep time of introspection and healing. I just want to find out all the cool past lives I had. Like, was I, I don't know, was it Joe DiMaggio or something, or, like.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because literally in the previous episode, so part 1 of this series, I go into exactly that, which I call past life tourism. Those are people who come in and they just want to know who they were in a past life, or, where they were living, what year it was, what happened, that sort of thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's interesting. And since I do podcasts and that, I don't want to flip this. I'm going to get into, interviewer mode instead of being.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
So much of what I've learned over the last year has been about, our shadow self and the Jungian concept of the shadow, and that throughout the course of our lives, there are painful things that either happen to us, or the choices that we made, or whoever, just parts of our being that we just want to, like, don't really want to look at that.
Yeah.
Don't want to look at that. And I think that part of the benefit for the Akashics, if someone is coming at it from a mindset other than past life tourism, I love that. You should make a t-shirt. I'm a past life tourist.
100%.
I'm a past life tourist guide, right? Like, past life tour guide. But, if you're coming at it from the standpoint of, like, I'm trying to really figure the bigger picture of all this out, you're going to see some things. You and I went through some past life stuff where I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
That wasn't so pleasant, Then, and you're like, okay, well, is there still any residual karma from that? Or has that karma been burned off? Or what choices have I made? And you can see kind of as you go through the different lifetimes. And the other thing is, of course, time is only completely linear here in 3D land. So
right,
stuff's kind of all going on simultaneously in some way outside of 3D time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, what is your experience with that, as far as how many people come to you from the heart and mindset of, hey, I'm willing to take the hard look because I want to grow and expand my consciousness and raise my vibration? And yeah.
Believe it or not, I would say 99% of the people who come to me are looking for that exact work, which is pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible percentage because, of course, you do have people who are wanting to know about certain relationships, or they're wanting to know about why somebody is in their lifetime currently. So those types of questions are not necessarily digging deep into the heart of who you are. But ultimately, and this is why my Akashic guides and the angels are so beautiful and wonderful, is because whether you want to look at it or not, they're going to tell you. So even if somebody does come to me with some more general questions, we do dive pretty quickly into exactly what their guides want them to know. If somebody comes to me and literally just wants to know where they were and what time and what year, that's fine. But ultimately, the message they're going to get is, yeah, we can tell you that information, but we have all this other information over here that you need to know. It's always about the guides redirecting us. And so that's not me. That's me being the interpreter. And our guides basically saying, okay, no more screwing around. You're actually paying attention now. So let's get down to work.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I know we talked about, like, I was like, hey, Annette, like, give it to me straight. Like,
yeah.
Because you can't, if you're not getting the hard information, you can't really change.
Yeah.
You've got to get the truth of it. And I think that's one thing about from the other side. I've never thought about this for a second until right now, but like, do you ever feel that there's any spiritual influence that is trying to mislead you about information, or do your guides and angels have it on lockdown and it's like, nope, like that's not going to happen to anyone?
That's a really, really amazing question. I have not felt that I have been misled in order to lead me off my path. I will say, however, and maybe this is something we will discuss in future episodes on this podcast, but I have had my angels mislead me on purpose to have an outcome that I may not like, simply because they're like, yeah, we needed you to learn that lesson, and we needed you to understand that by making that decision, that's what's going to happen. And you don't like that, so don't do that again. So like, they will literally tell me that it is in my highest good to do a particular thing. And then when I go do it and I'm like, well, that sucked. And they're like, so you're going to do that again? So they will mislead me in that way. But I have not come across personally any sort of spiritual interference. Now, I know that it does exist. I know that people have experienced that in the past, but I personally have not come across anything like that.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
And that's interesting, because that actually is a really beautiful segue to the next question, which is about doubts, right? And you and I have talked about this a little bit as well. And on the spiritual awakening path, we always come into that one point in time where you either have a crisis of faith or you have doubts about the information you're receiving, and you don't understand it because you're not seeing the big picture. Obviously, our angels and guides can see everything that's going to happen. So they're like, yeah, you're cool. And I'm like, hey, no, I'm not cool down here. Like, I'm not cool. Like, I'm actually stressing out. So you need to help me out here. So I wanted to ask you about any doubts that you have had about the information you received and any of the experiences that you've had.
I have. And it's brave of you to say that, because it's one thing to have your own podcast and be like, hey, I do this amazing thing and it works 100% of the time. And I'm not saying it doesn't work 100% of the time, but regarding a situation that you and I dealt with not too long ago, it seems in the natural that situation has gone 180 degrees in the opposite direction.
Right.
And I'm like, I was sending you an email. Hey, Annette, like, you sure the guides weren't just like, hey, it's pull one over on Ray Day? Like,
right.
And because boy, does this not happening. The frustration of that. And I guess that's where it comes down to, well, what is the bigger lesson? So part of my bigger lesson in all of this is non-attachment and boundary setting and authenticity stuff mentioned earlier. Like, okay, is it just deemed that, as we talked about, there are multiple potential timelines, and the timeline I would have preferred didn't manifest, a different timeline manifested. And that is where the doubts and the frustration come in, because ultimately, on the other side of this, and I know we've joked around about this before, but we signed up for this.
Yeah.
And man, I'm going to go have a serious conversation with my higher self.
Right?
When I'm on the other side, like, what the freaking heck were you thinking, man?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
probably wrestle myself to the ground and headlock and damn it.
Don't do this again.
Yeah, never again. And so, I mean, on the other side, they're much more concerned, I believe, about our development and our consciousness raising and our evolution than they are our comfort.
100%. Yeah.
Our comfort is a very temporal, time-based thing. We don't like being out of comfort. I mean, even like, I did endurance sports for 35 years. If you're running a marathon, you're not comfortable. But I don't think most people running a marathon aren't ever glad to stop, But like, you're still doing something that is an activity that you love. You just know there's a finish line. But with so much of this stuff, because like future predictions are very, very cloudy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's because we do still have free will. Even if we manifested this in this incarnation and it's like, here's our purpose and this is what we want to accomplish, we still have free will and we can derail that. Those future timelines can be challenging. And to me, that's where the doubt comes in, because you're like, this hurts. This really, really hurts. Like, when is this going to be alleviated? And if the other side's like, part of your soul evolution is learning how it shouldn't hurt anymore, you're just going to stay in it until you can release the hurt. And it's like, well, isn't that fun?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, is that, and it's such a hard thing too, because it's not that you need to deny your feelings, because if you're feeling hurt, you need to be able to express that. You need to be able to move through that feeling. The problem that we get into, especially when we're in that type of mentality, is if you are constantly going over the past over and over again about what didn't happen, or that something didn't go the way that you wanted it to, then you end up creating more suffering for yourself, right? So, I mean, that's the lesson that I think pretty much everybody needs to learn, which is that you create your own suffering by holding on to the past. And that is something that I did cover in a previous episode, which is kind of ironic given the fact that I delve into people's past lives, but yet I'm sitting here saying to people, well, you should live in the present moment, because it is true. Living in the present moment is the most peaceful thing you can do. Looking into your past lives can help you live more in the present moment by clearing those things that you have that are triggering you in your day-to-day life. And when you talk about the doubts that you've had, I'm 100% with you. We've had this conversation before that I have had just as many doubts. I have had those moments in time where I'm like, okay, this is completely not real. I don't know what's going on. Within the next 3 or 4 days, I will get signs from the universe, like they're showing me neon lights, essentially, of signs telling me that, yes, this is real. Yes, everything you're experiencing is on the right path and you're doing okay. And you were telling me that you get the same kind of confirmation. Is that correct?
Yeah, it happened, over the last year, at least twice that I can point to, where through this journey of, dark night of the soul and ego death and everything, reaching a state of just desperation. Nothing is going as desired. And it's unbelievably frustrating. And it takes you to a place of just raw authenticity. And that we joked around about, yelling at our guides and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
you don't understand how hard it is down here.
the same thing. Within 3 days of I had like 3 days recently of just an existential, I don't even know how to describe it, just given up trying in so many ways, because it seems nothing is going as desired. And the disappointment and the anger and the resentment and everything, and you're just like, this is just untenable. And then within like 3 days, ended up having that QHHT session with Angie, and the amount of overflow of supernatural support, understanding, encouragement. And it's, to your point, like neon level, hey, thank you for getting to that point of authenticity, of being willing to be that vulnerable and letting go. And because the more you do that, the less you're trying to force of will manifest what you think you want in this world. That gives us more that we can work with now. But God, getting there is hard. And in that, the other thing too is there may be people listening to this going, why the hell would I ever want to go down this journey of deep inner healing and inner work and stuff? It doesn't sound like it's a holiday in the sun, No, it's not. But I would think that if you asked me and I asked you, would give the same answer. Like if you knew that it was going to hurt this bad, but the end result was going to be genuine, authentic consciousness raising, expansion, and growth, would you still do it? And I would be like, yeah, I would still do it.
Every single time. Every single time. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio.
The number of times over the last year where I felt I can't take any more, like it has to change right now. And then it doesn't change. And you hit a new depth of disappointment, frustration, and then you're like, but on the healing on the other side of that, like, wow, if the situation had changed to what I would desire or think I desire any sooner, I wouldn't have had that healing because I would have had the appeasement of, oh, this situation's better now. So then you're grateful that it didn't work out yet because you would have missed that healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that the deeper that you are able to dive, the greater expansion you will have. And that is something that you can really only learn by experiencing it. I remember there was a time a couple of years ago where I was in a pretty deep, dark night. And similar to what you're talking about, I was like, I can't even function. I don't even know what's happening in my life. I don't even know what's going on. And I got to this depth that really showed me where I was and who I was. And I eventually was able to pull out of it. And once I was able to, the amount that had cleared, the amount of expansion, the amount of happiness that I felt on the other side was more than I could have ever possibly imagined. And that is just in one small portion of my lifetime. And so if you're able to continually do this over the course of your life, wouldn't you want to continue to do that? And quite frankly, we know, because we've looked in our past lives, that if we don't do it now, we're going to have to do it in the next lifetime. So it doesn't matter if you decide to bypass and be like, I'm done. I'm not doing this lesson today. I'm just going to go hang out on a beach somewhere and just ignore everything. Yeah, you can do that. That's your free will choice, but you're going to come back.
Yeah, even as you were just saying that, I'm just like, oh, no, God, please, let's just get it over with now. And it's interesting, too, because in going through the Akashics and looking at those past lives and just seeing how, one thing kind of layered on top of another. And like, in this lifetime, some ground was gained, but then, boy, in this lifetime, not so much. And it goes back to that thing about awareness. I mean, as far as I'm concerned in that, going through the Akashics, the same with like really super high quality astrology is it's providing you information to make different choices. So it's the same thing with this information from the Akashics and what you just described. It's just like, okay, well, now I've got this information. I've recognized the pattern. I'm willing to get rid of this now so that I don't freaking have to come back and do it again.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when you were talking about future timelines, that is something that always gets a little sticky. And like you were saying, as far as having to second guess yourself and second guess the information you're hearing and that sort of thing based on the fact that you thought a particular thing was going to happen. The other thing I wanted to mention was time. Because there have been many times in my life where I've known something is going to happen with my gifts. Like there's times when I just know something is going to happen. And I'm like, okay, well, why hasn't it happened yet? What's going on? Why has this not come to fruition yet? And ultimately, the biggest reason, especially if this is a particular event that is meant for you, that is written in your soul contract that you are meant to experience, and you know this, but then it's still not happening. The reason why is because of time. Because you may not know that, okay, so maybe this particular event is not going to happen for another 2 years or maybe another 3 years. So when you initially get a session, and if things do pop up where you get potential future timelines, how do you handle it, Ray? Like, how do you process that information and really take on the information and know that, okay, this is the outcome that I want, and I got sort of that confirmation? How do you let go of that information to allow the universe to bring it to you?
This is where the screaming comes in, Annette. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I got to tell you, I don't know yet. I'm trying to work through. It's just a daily choice of like trying to not put your attention there, because there's the axiom of Eastern philosophy that where your attention goes, energy flows. And
100%.
if you are putting too much attention on things not happening in the time that you would prefer, you're just putting more energy into that. And it's the irony, another thing that we've talked about just in our own, chats and that, like, you have to let go of the very thing that you're wanting to have.
Right.
And it's the whole concept of, again, going back to a Zen axiom, like, if you want to hold water in your hand, you can't do it with a closed fist, right? You have to allow that openness. And I think that's really part of letting go is trust, which is another part of the dynamic that has come up repeatedly for me. Because you're just like, especially I think in, Western thought, it's like, hey, if it's to be, it's up to me. Right? Like, you got to go make it happen. Like, very type A, like, if you want to succeed, you better do this. You better be at the right meeting. You better have the right words to say. You better do the right thing. You better take the effort, make it happen. Go, go, go. And the antithesis of that is trust, faith, patience, endurance.
Right.
Those things aren't quite as fun. It feels a lot better whenever you walk up to the plate with a bat in your hand. I'm like, throw the damn pitch. I'm going to hit it, And instead of saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you just sit back and let somebody else take that swing? Because there's a lesson you're going to learn from watching them that you wouldn't have gotten if you were up there trying to do it by force. And it's hard. So I don't have that one completely down yet. It's a daily struggle. And the only thing I can even say is it's really where prayer and meditation come in. Tapping, the whole, EFT thing. There's an app called the Tapping Solution that is outstanding. Yoga. I mean, I go to yoga 4 or 5 times a week, but I practice meditation a lot. And all of these things build our internal self. And the stronger that we are in our internal self, the easier it is to deal with the rise and fall of the tide of these challenges that we're growing through. Yeah, but do I wish maybe the next time, no, you know what? I don't even want to say that because I don't even want it to be that damn long. Maybe I'll have time management, or lack of time management down better next time.
Well, and maybe we can do a follow-up for the second season, and you can kind of let us know where you are. And because as well as I do, a year is a very long time when it comes to spiritual growth, and you can change in leaps and bounds in a week, let alone a year. So it's such a beautiful journey.
I value you as a person as well as a spiritual worker and a light being greatly. And thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
And likewise to you. Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you for sharing your heart with us, your experience, being completely vulnerable as well as truthful about your entire experience. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I post daily tarot card readings there at infinitesoulllove1111. If you are interested in listening to more podcasts like this one, don't forget to head to Paris Underground Radio at parisundergroundradio.com. And don't forget to follow Paris Underground Radio on social media as well. Thank you so much. Until next time.